Hi, everybody. I'm Amy.
And I'm Audria,
This is the right crowd. So grab a cup of coffee,
or a cup of tea.
maybe a little something on the rocks, and let's get started. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Can
Yes,
I just tell you the house is so quiet? I don't know what to do.
because of all the people being gone.
All the people are gone. The dogs are all sleeping. The hubs isn't here. It's nice.
Yes.
I'm not complaining. I'm just waiting. I feel like it's gonna come.
I,
So let's enjoy this while we can. What are we doing this week, Audria?
this week we are talking about writing a collection of short stories in a year. So if you guys don't have this book, it's by M.B. Franklin. Run out and get it. So you can write a collection of short stories in a year with us. And this one, the goal is to complete 10 short stories.
And it's part of a course that she teaches. Like she made a book out of a course that she teaches. So, and this one's going to be a little different because we're going to talk about the book and we're going to break down some of the things in the book. However, it is going to be a book that we're going to work on throughout the year because it is in a year. So, our goal is to be able to write a collection of short stories. However, what we have discovered is some of these aren't really going to get us, like, I have no interest in writing horror. I mean, I could,
Yeah.
no interest. So I'm not going to write a horror book, a horror story. However, by the using the things that she goes over in each chapter, we'll be able to write our own version of a short story collection in a year.
That's right. And you can check in with us next year to see how we did. And I'm
Yes.
sure we'll update you along the way. But I'm kind of excited about this, getting 10 short stories done, because as an author, if you are about to release a book, or if you're a new author or an experienced author, it is helpful to have short stories short stories so that you can use them for reader magnets, for your newsletters, participate in anthologies, etc.
Part of a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
You could use a short story as part of a Kickstarter where if a certain level they get a short story that only the people from the Kickstarter in that level are ever going to read. So there's lots of uses for short stories. And like Audrey said, there's contests just for short stories. These her short stories, when she goes over it, they're longer. But there are there are mini, there are short stories where literally tell a story in 4 words. Like there's a lot of options when it comes to short stories. So, alrighty. Oh, and did you get the workbook?
I did get the workbook.
So I like that. Oh, look, here's my bookmarker. I don't even remember this was in there. I have a bookmarker.
Oh, cool.
And she goes over when she talks about what to do in here, she actually gives you the spaces in here to do. So not necessary. It just gives you the space to do the work from here. All right, you want to get started?
Okay. So again, this one by M.B. Franklin. She starts with an introduction, and the very first one that she goes over. We've done short story. We did a little bit of short story stuff last year, over the last couple of years. So you see, we're continuing with a theme. Short stories are a great way to improve your writing. And so that's why I wanted to spend some time on short stories for my own personal writing career. But she talks about how she's divided the book into 30 sections. And she figures that you could spend a fortnight, so she is not using standard American English.
Well, that's because she's from the UK.
That's right. So hint, hint. So fortnight, I believe, I looked it up one time. I equate it to about 2 weeks. I think it's about 10 to 12 days. I don't remember.
And I told you something was going to happen. The dog is barking.
Let me Hello. Pause for just a second here, because now it's driving me crazy to know exactly what a fortnight is.
All right, you look up Fortnite. I'll go see if there's someone actually here that I need to tell them to be quiet. So, Audrey, you want to get us started?
Okay, sure. we've done short stories before, and the reason I wanted to spend more time on short stories is because it's great to have short stories in your arsenal as an author. You can use them as newsletter magnets. You can use them in competitions to bring raise awareness about your own writing. Or I've seen authors take their character from a series and put them in a situation for a short story. So now readers have read about that character in a short bite, and that will just suck them in, so to speak, to read the whole series and want to know more about that character. So they're great to have. You can also get them or use them in anthologies as well. So to start with, she gives a little bit of an introduction, and she figures she's divided this book into 30 sections. And she figures you can complete a short story the way she has outlined it and defined it in her process. You can complete a story in a fortnight. For us Americans, a fortnight is 2 weeks. So 2 weeks.
Well, she is from the UK. So, I mean.
So it's fair. Or as they say in the TV show that I love, psych, I've heard it both ways. All right, so the first section in here is about flash fiction, which we were going to do a whole section on that, but it's a short little section on flash fiction. When I say we were going to do a whole section on that, I mean we were going to do a whole book on flash fiction, and you may see that in the future when we review a flash fiction craft book, but that's not this one.
No.
All right. So the first one is flash fiction. She has it divided into, as I said, 30 sections, and you can see it there. She's got you doing many different genres, which is cool. And as Amy said, we may follow our own paths for some of these stories because we don't have a real interest in that particular genre. For me, it depends. Depends. I don't know if I want to write a horror short story. I think I did by accident once from a prompt.
I could be Stephen King for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, I don't know. And then the sci-fi and the fantasy, I'm not sure. And the
Well, those are my wheelhouses.
So there's something for everyone in her book. And she takes you through, for each of the genres, she'll start with what is that genre? For example, what is flash fiction? And she also takes you through some of the basics, like what is a good story? And then she'll give you a prompt for that particular story. And this flash fiction one, it's about, the prompt involves a call being received in the dead of the night, which is kind of cool. It could go any way you want.
Yeah. And you know what's cool about whenever you do, because we've done this within the Stop Writing Alone community, where you'll have 15 writers in a Zoom call and we all get the same prompt. Not one of our stories is the same. Like they're all, whatever it is that we come up with. So it'll be interesting how closely we follow this to see what our different stories come up with. Like the first one, there's a call. Who answers the call? I bet who answers the call in my story is not the same person that answers the call in your story.
There's so many different ways with it. It's fascinating how prompts can
work. And how our brains work differently.
Yes. So for this first one, as you said, I got the workbook, and so did you. In the workbook, she gives you sections to answer the questions and to start writing on the prompt that she gives you. And for example, in this first one, how are caller and receiver feeling? So you need to know their emotions, and that's going to help you build the story. And then she gave you space to write it. Did you want to?
No. So the other thing she does in the beginnings of the chapters, towards the beginning of the book, not by the end of the book, she stops doing it, but she goes over some basics of just good story writing. And like have a notebook that you put it all in, some tips and tricks that she'll do. And then she also says that for each, except for flash fiction, for each of the other sections, she spends 3 sections on each of them.
Oh, yeah.
And for all of them, she tells you not to write the end of the story yet. She gets you to a certain point, and then at some point down the line, she'll tell you to write the end of the story. But she never has you finish a story when she's actually talking about it.
Which is fascinating.
But her next section is supernatural. And she again starts with some basic stuff about writing. And then she moves into some things to think about when you're writing a supernatural.
Yes, and I took a note in, like Amy said, she has 3 sections just on the supernatural, so 3 supernatural stories. And I took my notes from that one are that the notes for writing a supernatural in Supernatural 2 are, those are great tips for writing any kind of story. So like Amy said, great basic story information is included in this book. So with this book, you're not only, if you follow along, like Amy and I will be doing, you'll have at the end of the year 10 short stories, and you also have a very good foundation in writing story.
Yeah. And she says over and over again, don't edit yet, don't edit yet, don't edit yet. And I think a lot of people, I know speaking from experience, that's a loop I get caught in, is I go back and go edit, and then I never get to the new words. So sometimes the best way to write is just to write it and then go back, because that way you don't get stuck in this loop of write, rewrite, edit, write, rewrite, edit for the same chapter 50 times. So, okay. Oh, look, there she says, don't try to edit anything yet. There will be plenty of time for that later.
Which is, yeah, that's a good practice for any writer. And then so she's got 3 on she's got the 1 flash fiction, 3 on supernatural, 3 science fiction, and then a 3 romance. And then she's got some writing, just 1 for writing for children, but 3 for young adult. And 3 for crime. I like the way she's got it broken out that way. That way you don't just write a story for the most part and walk away from it. You have you have time to develop in that particular genre of a short story writing. Right.
And then she also gives examples on some of these chapters of books to look at in the genre, so you know what you should maybe sound like.
And that's always good to do, is to read in whatever genre you're planning to write in. So that's a great tip.
And then when you do get to the editing part, she actually gives you a list of things to look for. When you go back and you do your editing, she gives you a list. She also talks about in the, what section am I in? Science fiction. Was there anything else in supernatural you wanted to talk about?
No.
I'm like, where am I at? So when you get to the science fiction, she goes over some of the subgenres of science fiction. So there's not just science fiction, there's utopia, there's time travel, there's space flight, there's extraterrestrial. Like there's a whole list of subgenres that you can do when talking about science fiction. And again, she gives a reference to something that I've actually read, The Time Traveler's Wife. I also read 1984. I read both of those. I couldn't tell you about 1984 though, because that was in school. I don't have a lot of memories from that. I'm trying to decide. So my husband can remember when he was in a crib and the mobile was spinning around in his bed. Okay. My husband can remember carrying his blankie around. I can probably count on one hand the memories I have before the 5th grade. And I'm trying to decide if my brain is blocking out the bad memories so that I can say a positive, perky person. Or if I just don't have them because I don't have them. Like, I think my childhood was good. And why did I say that? What was the part of that made me want to say that? What were we talking about? What got me there?
1984.
Oh, not remembering whether or not I read 1984. I know I did, because I can see the cover. And I have a vague recollection of sitting in a classroom reading the book. But I just know I read it. I couldn't tell you what was in it. Sorry, that was a little... That was Wabbit Trail #1. Okay, so any other... And she does give more tips again on editing when you get to the editing. And then at the end, she tells you some tips on how to do, like, print it out, annotate it yourself, read it out loud, get someone else to read it, because even though your brain, you know what you meant to say, sometimes we will read what we meant to say and not what we wrote. So having someone else read it, literally, I was reading something this morning and I had to read the sentence 5 times, because instead of in, they put is and I couldn't do it. Like I was like, this sentence does not make any sense. What's the word here that is wrong? And it was simple as an is, because there wouldn't have been an autocorrect, because is a word, and it should have been in, and it was driving me crazy. Yeah. So anything else on science fiction for you?
Nothing else on science fiction for me.
Why don't you talk about romance?
So for romance, she said there are going to be 3 of those. And she talks about what the expectations are for romance, happy ending, a tragic ending, and so forth. She also guides you to try and replace the cliches, the typical cliches that you would get in a story about romance, with something more original. And when it comes to the editing part, that's part of the editing part, is getting rid of the cliches that are in the romance. She talks about a little bit about the genre. I'm already on romance 3. I'm sorry, I skipped forward.
That's okay. It's all the same. We weren't doing a deep dive into this one, so it's good.
All right, but to get started, you're going to start with your character and what kind of story it's going to be. Get to know your character, their biggest dream is etc. And then put your character in situations that are relatable. And
she also introduces scene cards and how you can use scene cards to write. She goes over that, and then she also gives you rules when writing dialogue. I mean, because in a romance, unless it's a romance between 2 animals that don't talk, and you're not having talking characters and they just look at each other, you're going to have dialogue. And so she gives you a whole rules using dialogue, which I think is great. Because for me, I always want my characters to talk, but I'm always like, where does the comma go before the parentheses or after the parentheses? And do you make a space? And do you do this? And because I can read it and know it's right, but then when I write it and I'm looking at it, is that what it looks like when I read it, like in someone else's book? So I like rules on dialogue, because I don't want to mess that part up.
They are pretty handy. So that is romance. She gives you, like I said, some tips on editing your romance. She takes you through the different sections as you're writing it. And for example, at the end of the romance number 1, she says, use the above to plan your opening scene and then write it out. And the above is all the stuff that you come up with reading that chapter: the scene heading, time of day, date, the characters you've already worked on, who your characters are from her prompts earlier in the book,
right?
Or earlier in that section rather. And then you write that opening scene. And then she takes you through in the next section on romance, on through the dialogue and so forth. And then the next section, I believe, is writing for children. And she only does 1 on that one. I think it's shorter genre. Shorter way that she's introducing that.
Yeah, and the one thing that I think I took away from this is, which as I read it, I was like, that's really true, is that it says that with children in mind, series are better. Because with a kid, okay, this is in no way an advertisement for Bluey. I've never watched Bluey. That's just the name that comes to my head, right? The kid, because I'm not giving an example of Caillou. That is teaching children to not behave well. I'm not into Caillou. But Bluey, say they love this character Bluey, they're going to be looking for another Bluey book, just like I would look for another Jack Reacher or Jack Ryan or Bosch, right? These are the characters. Kids are the same. They want this. The other thing is, if you make, she doesn't say this in here, I don't think. If you make a character that is lovable, they're going to want the plushie. They're going to want the t-shirt. They're going to want all the things. And kids nowadays are not the kids that we were. It didn't matter how much I loved Care Bears. I was not getting Care Bear sheets. Because we had sheets. We did not need a new pair of sheets just because the Care Bear stare was on it, right?
Right.
But nowadays, you can have Bluey sheets and comforters and pillows and slippers and all the things. So if you're going to write, if you find that you enjoy writing children's, that could be a whole, look at Arthur. The kid never changed size until 20 years. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, wait, maybe he should be a teenager by now. but all the Arthur things are out there to buy. So keep that in mind. If you get to the children's section and you enjoyed it, you might want to look a little more closely at whether or not it could be the moneymaker for you. If you didn't enjoy it, then don't do it, because that's not worth it. But if you find that you enjoy it, you might want to look into merchandising.
Right.
Okay.
And
Oh,
I
and then you on to crime.
Oh,
Yay. Okay.
oh, crime.
What
Well,
were
I
you
like,
going to say?
no, I was going to say, I like how,
Oh,
what?
in crime, kill all the people.
Okay. Well, what I was going to say is I like how, what I was going to say is I like how in this book, as you go along, whether it's with romance or fantasy or children's books or YA, that you're building a strong foundation in writing short stories all along
Yes.
the way. You can use each part in each different genre. So by the time you get to the last genre, which now I can't remember what the last comedy, you have all of that foundation to work into your short story. So that's why I'm really looking forward to running through this.
And a lot of the foundation you can use outside of short stories too.
Yes.
Like the dialogue tips. That's for every. Now, I like how in the dialogue tips, she actually gives you 2 dialogue sections where they tell the same thing. One is less words. So if you're trying to do it in a short story, less is more.
Yeah.
However, if you're trying to do a long form, then more is more, right? So
More is fine.
more works.
So in the crime section, this is where she starts to give you information on, of course, you have to have clues, you have to plot your crime, addressing the who, what, when, why, where, and how, etc. But she also takes you through pace and slow pace, fast pace. And then she gives you the prompts that she gives you in this one are really good prompts. If you're writing a long form mystery like a novel or a short story, great questions to ask. Will the crime be planned? How will the perpetrator be feeling physically and emotionally as they commit the crime? What events will occur after the crime? These are all great things to know, whether it's a short story or a novel. And not only just to know them, but to have, speaking from experience, to have on hand so that you can remember as you're marching down through the page word count of your story, and you have to remember what else was happening during the time of the theft, because maybe I can use that as a clue for. So yeah.
It's kind of like when you're watching a movie and the character is carrying a briefcase, and the next second the briefcase is gone because they didn't double check when they did an edit or a cut, or came back to the scene. The character forgot to pick up the briefcase, and now you're going, wait a minute, where did the briefcase go? That's the same thing here. Like, make sure that you carry through what you started, because you'll hear about it if you don't.
All right, so that is crime, and basically she takes you. Is there another section that you wanted to speak more about?
Nope.
Okay, so that's it.
Oh, hang on. I think it's funny at the beginning of crime. What defines a crime story is it contains a crime.
Example.
Like, well, yeah. Crime.
So like I said, as you go through this book, you're going to develop some great skills. And on the blurb on the back, she says, you will develop your writing talent, your show, don't tell, your dialogue, your vocabulary. You'll be working with atmosphere, tension, pace, planning, plotting, and characterization. So this is one of the reasons that we decided to do this book, because one, we both wanted to write short stories and to have them in our arsenal for other things. And also writing short stories helps you to develop the skill to write tight, as they say.
And one of the things that I have on the books for this year is I actually have a short story collection that I'm like 1 or 2 stories shy of being done. I will be able to go through and use her tips, because in all of mine, people die. So I'll be sticking with the crime section. This one. But I'll be able to go back and look at all the sections for the editing and the dialogue and all the things to make sure that I'm not missing something, and that all of my stories have what a short story needs to have in order to engage the reader. Because I don't want them to read the first one and be like, well, that was crap. I'll give her a chance and read one more, and then they never get to short story 24 because I lost them on story number 2 because I didn't do it right.
Right, exactly. And as we said at the beginning, I think we both got the workbook. So when we come back and review this, you're going to see I'm going to actually pledge to write in this book. You normally just do it on a separate.
I started. Let me see. I think I started. I think I had words in here. There's some words. I got some words. I did flash fiction and supernatural, and then I stopped writing. And I'm really good about buying a workbook and starting the workbook. I'm not so good about finishing a workbook.
You've heard
so we'll see.
So we'll see, everybody. You're going to hold us to it to finish the workbook and to get 10 stories done this year. And we're going to follow it very closely, but we might not write, like you said, I don't want to write a horror. So we might not have a horror story in your collection in your 10, but we're going to have 10 stories.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
Or, right? Okay, so that's it for write a collection of short stories in a year. And as I said, we both got the workbook, and I'm pledging to actually write in the workbook and not do it all in a Google Doc or someplace else. I've started writing in my workbook already. And by the end of the year, we will each have 10 stories, or maybe we'll have 8 stories or 6 stories.
I think 10 stories is feasible.
Yeah.
Especially if we just do one a month, we could end up with 12.
That's true. So if you want to follow along with us, get MV Franklin's book, write a collection of short stories in a year, and let us know how you're doing. And also like and subscribe. So
like and subscribe.
Other
we
authors
should come up with a little song about like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. That could be our background music. Like, what's the word where stuff is like implanted, but you don't realize? What is it?
Subliminal.
Yes, we need subliminal.
Which is illegal.
Oh, no, let's not do that.
That's funny. Okay, let's do the bye. Okay. Bye. That one is going to be a hot mess.
And you can leave a lot of that in there if you want.